Presumed guilty under scrutiny, the GRAP Files, Episode 9, the final file. Hi, welcome back to Episode 9. I am your host, Roger Warstone. This segment is the infinite clock, the 20-year shadow. I want you to take a moment and think about the year 2005. Where were you? In 2005, the world was a different place. We were in the heat of Clover War on Terror. I was a young, motivated soldier believing in the mission, believing in the soldier's creed, and believing that the uniform stood for something immutable. As I sit in front of the microphone today, it is January 8th, 2026. For most people, 2 decades is an entire lifetime of growth. For me, it has been an infinite loop of institutional theft. The clock has been ticking for 21 years, and for every one of those seconds, the United States Army has held a knife to my throat. They didn't just investigate me in 2012. No, they reached back into the archives and pulled out a ghost from 2005, a vague, unfounded inquiry that was closed years ago. And they used it to illegally backdate a flag that should have never existed. Think about the math of the malice. They waited until the very moment I signed my DD 214, the very moment I thought I was free, to pull me back into the good old boy trap. They told me my retirement didn't count. They told me my rank didn't count. And then they handed me a bill for $70,000. As of this morning in 2026, they are still siphoning my retirement money. They are still treating me like a staff sergeant when I earned the rank of sergeant first class through blood, sweat, and the highest recruitment numbers in the state. They have done nothing to assist me. They have done nothing to give me back what they stole. Every time I write an appeal, every time I go to the inspector general, they look at my evidence and they look the other way. They think if they ignore me, I'll sound crazy. They think that if they keep this paperwork in a loop, I'll eventually run out of breath. They're wrong. This podcast is the evidence file they tried to shred. Today, we aren't just telling a story. We are launching this podcast strike against the heart of a corrupt machine. This segment is the anatomy of the scapegoat. Let's dive into the investigation of the investigation. Why did they need me to be guilty? Why did they need me to be the thief? The answer is simple. Task Force Raptor. Task Force Raptor was the Army's responsible to $1 billion budgetary failure. The Guard Recruiting and Assistance Program was a mess from the day it was designed. It was designed by high-level generals and private contractor called Docupak. They built a system with no oversight, no clear rules, and no accountability. When Congress realized that over $1 billion had followed through this program, they started asking questions. The generals had two choices: admit they failed to manage the contract or blame the soldiers on the ground. They chose option two. They spent $28 million of your taxpayer money to investigate 100,000 soldiers. They treated every recruiter like a potential criminal. They titled thousands of us a permanent mark on our FBI records that says we were investigated for fraud, even if we were never charged. I remember the face of the CID agent who followed me to Dave and Buster's, and I remember the look of a man who knew he had nothing. He had my bank records clean. He had my phone taps clean. He had my surveillance logs clean, but he had a quota. He had a good old boy boss back at the headquarters who needs results to show Congress. This is the jurisdictional loophole in action because the money flowed from the federal government to a private contractor, Docupak, and then to the soldiers. The CID claimed they had federal jurisdiction, but the soldiers weren't on Title 10 or Title 32 orders. When they were doing G-RAP work, they were independent contractors for a private company. The CID had no more right to investigate us than they had to investigate a civilian working at a grocery store. But they took that power anyway. They used the color of law to intimidate young recruits. I saw them target Hispanic and black soldiers. That was disgusting. They knew these kids didn't have money for lawyers. They knew they could scare them into signing away their paychecks. This was institutional bullying disguised as justice. They were clawing back $1,000 here and $2,000 there from privates, while the Docupak executives walked away with millions in profit, and the generals, they retired with their star and their six-figure pensions, while I was left with a $5 retirement check. How do you survive that? How do you look at your children and tell them the country you serve just stole their Christmas? You survive by realizing that the system isn't broken. It's working exactly how they designed it. It's designed to protect the top by crushing the bottom. This segment is the 2026 rot, a national crisis. But let's look bigger. Why am I still fighting this in 2026? Because the rot in Pennsylvania National Guard is the same rot we see in the White House and the halls of Congress. Look at our country today. We're living in a time where the President of the United States can steal, lie, and commit fraud right in front of our faces, and the media just looks the other way. We see federal departments, the Department of Justice, the FBI, committing perjury in front of Congress. We see the horrific evidence of high profile pedophile cases that lead to the most powerful people in the world, and yet no one is in jail. There is an undeniable, unwritten connection between our leadership and foreign powers that do not have our best interests at heart. We are seeing our military committed to war crimes on a scale that is unprecedented in American history. And who pays the price? Not the ones in the suits, not the ones that signed the executive orders. It's the little people. It's the recruiter in Philly. It's the single mom in the National Guard. It's the veteran who gives his back and his legs to the service only to find out his records were lost when it came time for his benefits. I hear the stories every day. I had soldiers tell me they wanted to take their own lives because the CID made them feel like a piece of garbage. I've seen marriages dissolve because the financial strain of a $70,000 debt is more than a human heart can bear. This isn't just about Roger Warstone anymore. This is about a country that has lost its moral compass. What happened to me is a warning. If they can do this to a sergeant first class with a master's degree and a perfect record, if they can illegally backdate his life and steal his retirement, they can do it to you. I believe God is searching among us in 2026. I think He's looking for a remnant of people who are willing to break out of the good old boy system. He is looking for people who are tired of the lying, tired of the stealing, and tired of the bullying. The army was built to be the protector of the republic, not a tool for careerists to commit serious or fraudulent investigation that drive soldiers to their lowest points. We need a change, not a policy tweak, not a memo. We need a complete ground up reform of how the military treats its own people. This segment is the military reform we need. We cannot just talk about the problem. As a detective, I look for solutions. Here's a comprehensive plan for reform that I plan to send to every member of Congress at some point. This is how we end the scapegoat protocol. The first pillar, independent investigative neutrality. No more family investigating family. The Pennsylvania National Guard should never be allowed to investigate Pennsylvania National Guard. The rule, any administrative or criminal investigation must be led by an officer from a different state or a civilian police detective. If a soldier is accused of fraud in Philadelphia, a Philly detective should be one conducting the interview. We need people who follow the code of criminal procedure, not people who follow the code of protecting my boss promotion. Pillar two, CID and IG structural oversight. The CID has become a law unto itself. They respond to no one. The rule: the CID must have a direct reporting line of the Inspector General, and the IG must have the power to penalize agents who manufacture narratives. We need mandatory classes for investigators on how to resist higher power influence. If a general tells a CID agent to find something on a soldier, that general should be the one facing charges for obstruction of justice. Pillar 3: the failed case barrier. In the civilian world, if a prosecutor fails to find evidence, the case is dismissed. In the military, they just shift to administrative punishment. The rule: if a CID investigation fails to find criminal evidence, it is legally prohibited to use the same information to issue an administrative flag or demotion. You don't get a second bite at the apple just because you failed as an investigator. Pillar 4: the 180-day rule. They kept me flagged for years while they fished for a crime. The rule: implement a strict 180-day limit for all administrative flags. If the government cannot bring formal charges in 6 months, the flag is automatically removed and the soldier's record is cleared. No more chronic daily humiliation while a file sits on a desk. Pillar 5: prohibition of outsourced military programs. Docupak made millions while we lost our lives. The rule: explicitly ban private entities from managing inherently governmental functions like recruiting incentives. If the Army wants a program, the Army must have the guts and the personnel to run it themselves and be accountable for the budget. Pillar 6: the DD 214 shield. The day I retired, I had my papers. I was a civilian. The rule: legality solidify the DD 214 as a final binding document. Prohibit immediate illegal recalls from retirement for administrative reasons. Once a soldier has originally signed out, they are a civilian and they must be protected by the same Bill of Rights as every other American. Pillar 7: debt, adjudication, and financial due process. They hit me with a $70,000 debt and a $5 paycheck without a single hearing. The rule: prohibit the military from assessing massive debts or withholding pay without a full hearing in front of a civilian judge. You cannot be judge, jury, and executioner of a soldier's bank account. Pillar 8: bias and equity impact assessment. We have to talk about race. We have to talk about why the minority soldiers were first ones the CID targeted. The rule: required the Department of Defense to conduct annual reviews of all administrative punishments if Hispanic and Black soldiers are being disproportionately targeted. We need an immediate federal civil rights investigation into that command. This segment is the final charge, the counterstrike. I am walking out of the shadows. For 14 years, I felt like I was the only one fighting this battle. I sat in the corner of my house in a fetal position, crying out to God I thought had abandoned me. I felt the shame of the demotion. I felt the pain of the $5 check. But then I had a dream. I saw the wolf mastered. I saw the wolves destroy my enemies. I saw the truck flip and crush the snake of malicious prosecution. And I realized that I wasn't weak. I was being forged. I am sending this reform to every congressman who claims to stand for justice. I am sending it to the ones who say they support the troops, but look the other way when those troops are being eaten by their own leadership. To the good old boy system in the Pennsylvania Army National Guard, I know you're listening. You think that because you have the higher rank, you have the truth. You don't have the power, but I have the evidence. You have the titles, but I have the testimony of the hundreds of soldiers I recruited with integrity. I am not going back to the Board of Military Records to ask politely for my rank back. I am not going to beg you to stop stealing my retirement money. I am going to make you answer for it. We are living in a time of war crimes, pedophilia, and systemic fraud. If we don't fix the army, if we don't protect the little people at the bottom of the chain of command, then we have no hope of fixing this country. Now, I have a message for the ones who were actually there. If you or anyone had anything to do with my case, the generals that made those decisions, the agents that investigated me, I want you to listen closely. You continue adding false hopes just to keep your jobs. It sounds to me that you all had a job only because this investigation was requested from higher ups and you needed results to stay on board. You weren't hunting for the truth, you were hunting for a paycheck. This is why you kept me in limbo. That is why you waited until the very last minute, until the day I retired, to bring that illegal idea to the generals of pushing back my flag more than 10 years ago. You thought that by that time I'd realize what happened, I would be too broken to fight back. You thought that $70,000 debt will be the final nail in my coffin, but you were wrong. These things and many other things you all did to me will be brought to justice by the very same department you work for. Because despite the rot at the top, not everyone has the same belief system you do. There are people in the system who actually have balls. There are people who think on their own. They have a fine line for justice and they will see this through. They will look at the backdated paperwork, they will look at the lack of evidence, and they will see the malice in your actions. It might take me years to find that person, but I'm not going to give up. I will be here. And if they don't, if the system fails one last time, then God will make sure you answer for what you did to me and countless of other soldiers. You may hide behind your rank and your closed files today, but you cannot hide from the truth forever. God is searching among you. Will you be the one to stand up? Will you be the one to break that cycle of bullying? Or will you be another yes man watching while honest soldiers get destroyed? I am walking out of the shadows. My name is Roger Warstone. I'm a private detective. I am a father. I am a soldier. And the hunt for the truth has only just begun. And the snake from my dream has been crushed. The counterstrike is here. The truth doesn't have a rank, neither does justice. Whether it's corporate board, a government agency, or a criminal conspiracy, the tactics of fraud are always the same. They hide behind the complexity. They rely on your silence. They bet on you being too overwhelmed to fight back. At our agency, we don't just review files, we dismantle the lies led by Roger Warstone, myself, a detective who spent 20 years fighting institutional theft from the inside. We know how the machine works and we know how to break it. How we can help you? If you feel like the walls are closing in or if something just doesn't feel right, we provide the expert eyes you need to uncover the truth. Criminal defense investigations. We find the evidence the authorities overlooked or ignored to build a narrative that protects your rights. Corporate and financial fraud. From good old boy kickbacks to complex embezzlement, we track the money and the motives. Institutional betrayal, if you are being scapegoated by an employer or a government entity, we provide the counterstrike you need to clear your name. Due process protection. We ensure that no one, no matter how powerful, is allowed to be judge, jury, and executioner of your life or your finances. Don't sit in the shadows. The biggest mistake you can make is waiting for a corrupt system to fix itself. Whether you are a veteran being denied benefits, a business owner being defrauded, or an individual caught in a legal nightmare. The hunt for the truth starts with a single call. They think if they ignore you, you'll eventually run out of breath. They are wrong. Contact us today. Do you have a question about your case? Are you unsure where to turn? Speak with a team that has the balls to stand up for the system. No case is too complex. No opponent is too powerful. Call me 267 800 9118. The counterstrike is here. Call us now.